What if everything you've been told about death is a lie? What if the moment you take your last breath is not an ending, but the unveiling of something that has always been there hidden beneath the illusion of time and flesh? Have you ever wondered why every ancient mystery school, from Egypt to the early Gnostics, spoke not of dying, but of remembering? For centuries, religions have tried to comfort us with promises of heaven and resurrection. Yet, deep within the oldest spiritual texts, there's a forgotten teaching that whispers a shocking truth. You were never meant to die, not in the way you've been taught. The Gnostics, those ancient seekers of hidden wisdom, believed that immortality was not a reward to be given after death. It was the natural state of a soul that has awakened from the illusion of matter. But why was this knowledge erased? Who decided that humanity must fear death rather than understand it? And what happens when one finally remembers who they are beyond the body? In this video, we will uncover the ancient Gnostic secret that reveals the real meaning of immortality and why the soul can never be destroyed. As you listen, stay until the end, because what you're about to discover may completely change how you see your life, your body, and what lies beyond. If you're drawn to uncovering the hidden truths that the world has forgotten, make sure to subscribe and join us on this journey into the ancient light. Every week, we reveal the secrets that were buried to keep you asleep. To understand the Gnostic secret of immortality, we must first confront how the concept of death was rewritten. In the ancient world, before dogmas hardened into religion, the idea of death was fluid, a transition, not a punishment. But something changed. The early Gnostics believed that powerful forces, both visible and invisible, twisted humanity's perception of death to keep us enslaved in fear. They called these forces the Archons, rulers of illusion, who built the material world as a kind of prison for the divine spark within us. Imagine for a moment that your soul was not born here, but descended like a beam of light passing through layers of darkness until it reached the material world. This, the Gnostics said, is the origin of your amnesia. The body became a vessel, the world a veil, and those who control this realm made sure that you would believe that death was the ultimate loss, the final void. But what if that belief was the greatest deception of all? Early texts discovered in Nag Hammadi describe this cosmic manipulation in symbolic language. They tell of the demiurge, a false creator who claimed to be God, declaring himself the ruler of all things. Yet the Gnostics taught that the true, unknowable source, the real divine realm, exists beyond him, beyond the stars, beyond all matter. A demiurge's greatest success, they said, was convincing souls that they were separate from that source. And nothing enforces that illusion more deeply than the fear of death. When you fear death, you cling to matter. You identify with your body, your possessions, your name. You forget that these are only temporary garments worn by something eternal. Know yourself, the Gnostics said, and you will know that you were never born and can never die. But those who held power could not allow such knowledge to spread. A humanity that knows itself as immortal cannot be ruled through fear. Ask yourself, why do all systems of power, even today, teach you to obey out of fear of loss of status, of health, of life itself? Could it be that this same ancient distortion still works through our modern world? Could the fear of death still be the invisible chain that binds the human soul? Stay with me, because in the next revelation, we will explore how the earliest mystery schools understood death not as an end, but as a doorway that the unawakened simply fail to see. Long before cathedrals and churches rose from stone, the ancient mystery schools whispered a secret to their initiates. If you die before you die, you will never die. At first, this sounds paradoxical, but to the Gnostics, Egyptians, and early mystics, this phrase contained the essence of spiritual awakening. Death was not a tragedy, it was a rehearsal for remembering. The initiates learned to pass through the illusion of self before the body's final breath. They practiced symbolic death, the dissolution of ego, attachment, and ignorance, so that when physical death arrived, it found nothing left to destroy. In the temples of Egypt, This process was dramatized through ritual. The aspirant entered a dark chamber, symbolically entombed. For 3 days, he faced his deepest fears: isolation, silence, and the annihilation of identity. When he emerged, he was declared twice born. He had seen beyond the veil of matter and realized that life and death were merely phases of one continuum. The Gnostics inherited this sacred science, transforming it into an inner process rather than an external rite. The Gospel of Philip, one of the Nag Hammadi texts, states, "Those who say they will die first and then rise are mistaken. If they do not first receive the resurrection while they live, when they die, they will receive nothing." This resurrection while living was not about miracles or bodies rising from tombs. It was about awakening the divine consciousness within the spark of the true God, trapped in flesh. The Gnostics called it the light of Sophia, the remembrance that the soul originates from the pleroma, the eternal fullness beyond creation. To die before death meant to let go of everything that the Archons had woven into the mind: fear, guilt, and the illusion of separation. Once freed, the initiate realized that death was nothing more than a change of garment, a return to the luminous source that never ceased to exist. Over time, these profound teachings were buried beneath layers of doctrine. The idea of inner resurrection was replaced with external promises: heaven for the obedient, damnation for the rebellious. But what if the real salvation was never meant to be given after life, but within it? What if immortality is not a future event, but a state of consciousness hidden inside you right now? Many scholars believe this is why Jesus, in certain Gnostic interpretations, was not seen as a savior through blood, but as a teacher of remembrance. He came to reveal the path out of ignorance, not to establish a new religion. In the Gospel of Thomas, he says, "Whoever finds himself is superior to the world." The meaning is profound. When you truly know who you are, even death loses its authority over you. Pause for a moment and reflect. What would your life look like if you no longer feared death? How different would your choices be if you knew you were eternal consciousness merely dreaming itself through a body of dust and breath? The Gnostics claimed that only by facing this truth can a person awaken. And that awakening is not reserved for mystics. It is the destiny of every soul that dares to question what it has been taught. Stay with me, because in the next revelation, we will descend deeper into the very origins of the soul itself and discover how, according to Gnostic cosmology, you existed long before this world began, and you will exist long after it ends. To truly grasp why you will never die, you must first remember where you came from. The Gnostics described existence as a vast, luminous ocean of divine consciousness, the pleroma, or fullness. Within it, countless emanations, or eons, expressed different aspects of the divine. Among them was Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom itself. But Sophia, moved by an uncontainable desire to know the source more deeply, projected her light beyond its appointed boundary. That act of yearning, pure yet unbalanced, gave birth to the demiurge, the architect of the material world. This demiurge, ignorant of the higher realms from which he unknowingly emerged, declared, "I am God, and there is none besides me." The Gnostics saw this as the beginning of the great forgetfulness, the moment when matter was born and the divine spark became veiled. From Sophia's fall came the physical universe, a reflection distorted by separation. Yet within that imperfection, she hid her essence, scattering fragments of her divine light into all living beings. Those fragments are us. Each human soul, according to the Gnostics, is a spark of Sophia trapped in the creation of the demiurge. Life on earth is the stage upon which this divine light must awaken and remember its true home. The body, beautiful yet impermanent, was never meant to be the master. It was designed as a vessel, a temporary garment. But the Archons, servants of the demiurge, worked tirelessly to keep the soul asleep through illusion, fear, desire, ignorance, and the worship of material power. Every attachment we form possessions, identity, status tightens the chain that binds us to their realm. Do you see how the fear of death fits into this grand design? If you can be made to fear the end, you will never question who benefits from that fear. You will obey. You will consume. You will forget. The Gnostics understood this as the spiritual economy of amnesia system in which souls recycle endlessly through lifetimes, never realizing that the exit door was always within. Immortality, therefore, was not something to achieve later, but something to awaken to now. Sophia's secret was that even in her fall, she planted a code of return within each spark. This code is the yearning for truth, the quiet ache that makes you feel there is something more than this world. That ache is the memory of your origin calling you home. When you feel restless, when the world's pleasures no longer satisfy you, when you start questioning what's real, those are not symptoms of despair. They are signs that Sophia's light within you is stirring, reminding you that you were never born into this body, but merely projected into it for a time. The Gospel of Truth, another Gnostic text, describes this awakening beautifully. Ignorance of the Father brought terror and fear, but the terror grew dense like a fog so that no one could see. Thus error became strong. Yet when truth appeared, error was disturbed, for she discovered that she was nothing. In other words, once you see the illusion, it loses its power over you. This is the beginning of Gnosis, the inner knowing that liberates the soul. Once awakened, the initiate realizes that death cannot touch what is not bound by time. The body may fade, but the light returns to the pleroma, free of the veil. So, what if death is not a punishment, but a passage? What if the very pain you feel in life is not cruelty, but a reminder that you are not of this world? The Gnostics believed that through knowledge, remembrance, and inner awakening, the soul retraces Sophia's journey in reverse rising from forgetfulness to the fullness of divine consciousness. Stay with me, because in the next revelation, we'll expose how this divine remembrance was systematically buried by those who sought to rule through fear, how the message of eternal life was rewritten into obedience and control. If the soul is eternal and the divine spark within us cannot die, then one question must be asked: who would want humanity to forget such a truth? For the Gnostics, the answer was both metaphysical and historical. They believed that the powers who rule the material world, the Archons, manifest not only as invisible spiritual forces, but also through human institutions that mirror their control. The church, the empire, the political and social systems that dominate the mind, these are the earthly expressions of that same cosmic deception. When the ancient Gnostic communities flourished during the first centuries after Christ, they taught that the kingdom of heaven was not a future paradise, but an awakening of awareness within. Salvation was not granted by priest or temple. It was discovered in direct communion with the divine source. Each person carried within them the seed of eternity, a fragment of Sophia's light waiting to be remembered. But such a doctrine was dangerous. It created individuals who could not be ruled by fear or manipulated through guilt. And so, the machinery of power moved to silence it. By the 4th century, after the Roman Empire adopted Christianity, the process of rewriting spiritual truth began in earnest. The mystical teachings that once spoke of the soul's divine origin and eternal nature were replaced with dogmas of sin, obedience, and judgment. The concept of inner resurrection, the awakening to immortality within, was replaced by an external hope. A single resurrection granted only at the end of time to those who followed the Church's authority. The Gospel of Thomas, which spoke of finding the kingdom inside of you and outside of you, was banned. The Gospel of Mary, which portrayed a woman as the bearer of higher wisdom, was declared heretical. Why such fear of inner knowledge? Because knowledge, Gnosis, breaks dependency. A person who knows that their essence is immortal no longer submits to the structures built on terror. They no longer need to purchase forgiveness, bow before authority, or accept suffering as divine punishment. Imagine how the world changes when millions awaken to the realization that they cannot die, that the divine spark within them has existed before the birth of stars, Control crumbles when consciousness expands. The Gnostics saw this long before history confirmed it. They warned that the Demiurge and his Archons would weave illusions through dogma, convincing souls that salvation could only come from outside. And indeed, this pattern has repeated for millennia. Each time an enlightened teaching arises, it is co-opted, institutionalized, and transformed into a system of hierarchy. The same divine truths that once freed humanity become tools of subjugation. Some scholars argue that this suppression was not deliberate evil, but a survival instinct of organized religion. It needed to unify and control a vast empire. Yet to the Gnostic mind, it was a spiritual tragedy. The Church replaced revelation with obedience, personal experience with doctrine, freedom with fear. Instead of teaching that divinity was the birthright of every soul, it declared that humanity was inherently fallen, broken, and in need of mediation. Death became the ultimate weapon, eternal damnation for the disobedient, eternal reward for the submissive. But what happens when you strip immortality from the soul and tie it to external approval? Humanity forgets its origin. People live their entire lives chasing redemption they already possess, fearing annihilation that never truly exists. The Archons, the Gnostics said, feed on this fear. It is the spiritual energy of ignorance. Each act of fear, guilt, and despair strengthens the illusion that keeps souls from seeing the light they carry. Still, even amidst suppression, fragments of the old truth survived, hidden in mystic poetry, in alchemical symbols, in secret brotherhoods and esoteric traditions. The same message kept resurfacing. You are not your body. You are the consciousness observing it. In Sufi mysticism, in Kabbalistic texts, in Hermetic philosophy, echoes of Sophia's wisdom endure. It is as if the divine light refuses to be extinguished, reappearing whenever the world grows too dark. Even within mainstream Christianity, traces of the hidden doctrine can be found. When Jesus says, "The kingdom of God is within you," he speaks not of a distant reward, but of an inner realization. When he tells the thief on the cross, "Today you will be with me in paradise," he reveals that death is not a delay, it is a transition. But over centuries, these teachings were wrapped in metaphors, their true meaning forgotten by those who repeated them blindly. Ask yourself, why does nearly every religion, every empire, every authority thrive on fear? Fear of punishment, fear of loss, fear of death. Could it be that fear is the oldest form of control, one that ensures humanity never questions the illusion? If you knew beyond doubt that you are immortal consciousness, how differently would you live? Would you still submit to systems that profit from your anxiety? Would you still waste your life fearing the inevitable, when the inevitable is simply awakening to what you have always been? The Gnostics believed that remembering one's immortality was the ultimate rebellion against the false God of this world. For when the soul recognizes its divine origin, the Demiurge loses his power. In that moment of Gnosis, the Archons cannot touch you. Their illusions dissolve. You see the game for what it is, a theater of awakening, where each soul must play its part until it remembers that it was never the actor. It was the light projecting the play. Stay with me, because in the next revelation, we will uncover what the Gnostics called the path of return, how the awakened soul escapes the cycle of birth and death, breaks through the cosmic layers of illusion, and re-enters the eternal realm of light where it has always belonged. When the body dies, most people imagine the soul drifting upward into heaven or downward into punishment. But the Gnostics painted a different, far more intricate picture, one that reveals death not as a judgment, but as a test of remembrance. In their cosmology, the soul that departs from the body must ascend through multiple realms of illusion, each ruled by an Archon, each designed to confront the traveler with the weight of their own forgetfulness. Those who lived in ignorance of their divine origin become trapped, recycled into new bodies, reinserted into the dream of matter. But those who carry Gnosis' true inner knowing pierce through the deception and rise beyond the stars, back into the fullness of divine light. Imagine death not as a hallway that ends, but as a labyrinth of mirrors. Each mirror reflects a piece of your earthly identity, your name, your fears, your desires, your regrets. The Archons whisper, "This is who you are. This is all that you are." And if the soul believes them, it remains bound to their realm. Yet if the soul remembers, if it recognizes that these reflections are nothing but shadows, it passes through them, ascending toward the truth that was never lost. The Gnostic texts describe this process in symbolic language. In the Apocryphon of John, the Savior reveals to John the stages of cosmic ascent. The liberated soul, he says, must answer the Archons who guard each gate. But these answers are not passwords. They are states of consciousness. The soul must declare, in essence, "I am not of your world. I come from the light beyond." Only then can the barriers dissolve. The message is clear. Liberation is not granted by external forces, but achieved through self-knowledge. Death merely reveals whether that knowledge has been awakened. This is why the Gnostics did not fear death. They prepared for it through life. Every act of awareness, every moment of inner clarity was a rehearsal for the great crossing. They understood that the more a person identifies with the material self, the heavier their soul becomes. Fear, greed, resentment, these are weights that tether consciousness to the lower realms. But love, understanding, and remembrance lighten the spirit until it becomes luminous, capable of flight. In this sense, immortality is not a privilege. It is the natural condition of those who have learned to see beyond illusion. Consider how this teaching mirrors the patterns of your own daily existence. How often do you forget yourself, lost in the endless noise of survival? How often do you feel trapped by worry, anger, or desire, those same forces that the Gnostics said keep the soul asleep? Each moment of unconsciousness is a small death, a surrender to the Archons of your own mind. And yet, each moment of awakening, when you suddenly see your thoughts, rather than drown in them, is a miniature resurrection. The same process that liberates the soul after death is practiced right now, in every instant of awareness. In this sense, Gnosis is not a doctrine, it is a practice. It begins when you realize that you are not your story. You are not the mask you wear, the wounds you carry, or the titles you chase. These are reflections, useful for experience, but not for identity. When you begin to look at life from this higher vantage point, fear starts to dissolve. You no longer panic at the thought of loss, because you recognize that what can be lost was never truly yours. The eternal self, the divine spark, remains untouched. The Gnostics believed that those who awaken to this truth experience the first resurrection while still alive. The body continues to breathe and walk among others, but the consciousness within it is no longer confined by matter. The individual becomes a living bridge between worlds simultaneously human and divine, temporary yet eternal. Such a being no longer waits for death to find freedom, but they have already crossed the veil. Death, when it comes, is simply the final shedding of form. This path of return was not exclusive to the Gnostics. Echoes of it appear in the Tibetan Book of the Dead, in Egyptian funerary texts, in Hermetic philosophy. In every ancient tradition that valued inner knowledge, the same pattern emerges. The soul must journey back through the levels of existence, facing the illusions it once accepted as truth. Those who lived in alignment with the divine remember the way home. Those who did not must return until they do. But here lies the most profound revelation. You do not have to wait for death to begin this ascent. Every moment of awareness in daily life, every time you recognize illusion for what it is an act of liberation. When you detach from anger, when you forgive, when you meditate and sense the silence behind thought, you are literally moving through the archonic realms of your own mind. Each false belief you dissolve is one less chain binding you to the cycle of fear and rebirth. So ask yourself, how many of your daily choices are made out of fear of loss or death? How many times do you cling to the material, believing it defines you? Every attachment is a thread woven by the demiurge to keep you in the dream. But once you remember that you are the dreamer and not the dream, the illusion begins to crumble. When the Gnostic initiate completed their earthly journey and faced the threshold, they would not beg for mercy or await judgment. They would speak with serene authority. I am a child of the light. I belong to the pleroma. You have no power over me. And with those words, not spoken but known, the soul would ascend. That is the real meaning of immortality, the eternal recognition of one's true nature as divine consciousness, beyond decay, beyond birth, beyond end. Stay with me, because in the next revelation, we will uncover the living application of this wisdom, how knowing that you are immortal can transform your present life, your fears, your relationships, your choices, and why this forgotten truth is the very key to humanity's next spiritual awakening. To the unawakened, immortality is a fantasy, a dream of the ego that cannot bear to vanish. But to the Gnostic, immortality is not a reward, and it is not waiting beyond the grave. It is a state of remembrance, a shift in awareness that changes everything you touch. When you truly understand that you are an eternal spark of the divine, the entire architecture of fear collapses. And when fear collapses, so does control. Think about it. Every system of power, from religion to politics, from the economy to social hierarchies, depends on your fear of loss. Fear of losing status, wealth, love, youth, or life itself. The fear of death fuels the entire illusion of separation. But once you see through it, the world begins to rearrange itself around your new vibration. You stop reacting to fear and start responding to truth. You stop seeking approval and start radiating presence. That is the first sign of the living immortal, serenity in the face of chaos. The Gnostics taught that when a person awakens to the divine spark within, the body remains, but the consciousness no longer belongs to the demiurge. The Archons can still whisper, but their voices grow faint. The mind that once obeyed the world begins to serve the soul. Every breath becomes sacred, every moment a mirror of eternity. Even the smallest gesture, a smile, a word, an act of kindness, carries a weight that ripples beyond time, because it comes from the awareness of infinity itself. In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus says, "If you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring it forth, what you do not bring forth will destroy you." The hidden meaning is simple yet radical. Immortality must be lived, not merely believed. If you deny your eternal essence, you wither inside the illusion of mortality. But if you express it through love, compassion, and awareness, you transform the world around you. You become a living channel of the pleroma, a fragment of the infinite shining through matter. Modern science, ironically, is beginning to echo what the ancients already knew. Quantum physics tells us that energy cannot be destroyed, it only changes form. The body returns to dust, but consciousness, the field behind perception, continues. The Gnostic knew this not as theory, but as experience. Through meditation, contemplation, and inner silence, they pierced the veil and felt the truth of their eternal being. Their goal was not escape from life, but transfiguration within it, to walk through the world as one who remembers, to see divinity shining behind every shadow. How would your life change if you lived like that? Imagine waking each morning not as a prisoner of time, but as a traveler of eternity. Imagine loving without fear of loss, because you know the bond between souls is older than the stars. Imagine facing pain not as punishment, but as a wave of the ocean of experience, real but passing, unable to touch the depth of who you are. This is the consciousness of the living immortal. It is not distant, not mystical, but waiting in the quiet space between your thoughts. The Gnostics believed that this remembrance is the key to humanity's liberation. The demiurge's reign ends not through rebellion or war, but through awakening. When enough souls remember that they are light, the entire illusion loses coherence. Power structures fall. Fear evaporates. The Archons starve because no one feeds them with anxiety and ignorance anymore. The apocalypse, in its truest meaning, is not destruction. It is revelation, the unveiling of what was always there. The end of the world is simply the end of false perception. But awakening begins with you. It begins with the simple question, who am I really? You are not your story. You are not your wounds. You are not the voice in your head. You are the silence that hears it. You are the light watching the dream unfold. That awareness, the witness behind all experience, is your true self. And once you stabilize in that awareness, immortality is no longer a concept. It becomes your lived reality. You realize that you have never been born into time. You have merely visited. This is why the ancient initiates lived without despair. They could lose everything, and still they lost nothing. The body might weaken, the world might crumble, but the spark within remained untouched. To live from that place is to become free. Not free from life, but free within it. Free to act with love instead of fear. Free to forgive, because no harm can reach the eternal. Free to create, because creation is your natural expression. So the next time you look at your reflection, remember, you are looking at a costume. Beautiful, temporary, necessary for the play, but not the actor. The real you stands behind the mask, ancient and undying. Death does not end that. It merely removes another layer of disguise. And perhaps this is the greatest secret the Archons never wanted you to know. Once you live as if you cannot die, you stop serving their system. You become unpredictable, radiant, untamed. You begin to remember what Sophia remembered too late, that love, wisdom, and light were never lost. They were only sleeping, waiting for you to open your eyes. Stay until the end, because in the next and final revelation, we will bring everything together, the fall, the awakening, the return, and understand once and for all why the Gnostics said that to know yourself is to know God. Now you know. The greatest secret of all was never buried in ancient temples or sealed in forbidden scrolls. It was hidden within you. The Gnostics tried to tell us that the path to immortality is not an ascent into the clouds or a gift from any deity. It is the rediscovery of what you have always been. The soul is not created by the world. It is the light that created the world, dreaming itself through matter. Death cannot touch what was never born. Everything you've seen and lived has been part of one great forgetting. The fall of Sophia was not only her story, it was ours. Every soul that descends into flesh repeats that cosmic journey. The desire to experience, to know, to separate, only to find its way back home. But within that descent, the seed of return was always there. The longing you feel, that deep and ancient ache that nothing in this world can satisfy, that is your map home. It is Sophia calling herself back to the source through you. And so, the Gnostic secret of immortality is not a promise, it is a remembrance. You will never die because you were never fully here. This life, these bodies, these centuries, they are scenes in a divine dream, reflections in a mirror of time. When the mirror shatters, the light remains untouched. That is who you are. That is who you have always been. The Gnostics were persecuted because they dared to say, the kingdom of God is within you. They were silenced because they believed no priest, no empire, no power could mediate your connection to the divine. Their voices were nearly erased, but their message endures because truth cannot be destroyed. It only hides until hearts are ready to remember. And now, perhaps, you are one of those hearts. So let me ask you, now that you know you are eternal, how will you live? Will you continue to chase shadows, to fear loss, to serve systems that thrive on your forgetfulness? Or will you begin to live as the being of light you truly are, aware, compassionate, unafraid? The awakening begins with small acts: forgiveness, stillness, truthfulness. Every time you choose awareness over fear, you take one step closer to the divine fullness, to the pleroma that awaits beyond illusion. The Gnostics believed that to know yourself was to know God. When you see the divine spark in your own eyes, you begin to see it in everyone. The walls of separation dissolve. Heaven and earth are no longer distant. They meet in you. That is the revelation they died to preserve. You are the bridge between worlds, the eternal flame burning in temporary form. If this truth stirred something inside you, if even for a moment you felt that spark flicker, then you have already begun to remember. And that remembrance is precious. Protect it, nurture it, share it. Because every time one soul awakens, the light of Sophia grows stronger and the illusion of darkness fades. That is why we gather here to remember together, to keep alive what the world tried to bury. If you want to continue uncovering the ancient truths that were hidden from humanity, subscribe and join this community of seekers. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe happens after death? Do you feel that something within you is eternal? Your words may awaken someone else who still sleeps. Like this video, share it with those who feel the same calling, and help bring light where silence once reigned. Because every voice that speaks truth is a spark reigniting the eternal flame. And as we close, let this question echo in your heart. If you can never die, what are you truly afraid of losing? The search for knowledge does not end here, begins here within you.